Aldher began his journey into the neighbouring human realm of Ethegern early the next day, and reached the portal as evening fell. It had been half a lifetime since he had travelled this way, and as he approached the portal, he began to feel very nostalgic. Memories came flooding back of his time spent in Ethegern at the great tower where he had come to train as a young elf man. Here he had trained firstly as a green mage, studying the mystical magic found in nature. As his druid studies continued, he was schooled in practical magic, using magical herbalism, as well as working with magical symbols such as runes and oyams. Here he had met the young mage Jahedra, who studied the heavens, the lunar and solar cycles, and the magical energies that flowed from them. He was once again determined to find her. His journey through Ethegern took 2 more days, until he arrived at the Tower of Einar. It was just as he remembered. He smiled as he approached the bridge. The huge iron-clad door opened automatically as he approached. Inside he was greeted by a young apprentice, very like himself at that age. The young elf said how they had been anticipating his arrival, and that the mage Jahedra was waiting to welcome him in her study. Jahedra was also just as he remembered, although her soft features were now lined with her great age, and her chestnut hair now a silver grey. Her face lit up when he was shown into the room. She embraced him warmly and asked him to sit. She asked the apprentice to bring refreshments, while the 2 mages wasted no time in their discussions. Jahedra said how she had spent these years, since the last long night, studying the strange alignment of stars that had been seen just before the eclipsing of the last moon. She showed Aldher her charts and drawings. Aldher immediately recognized the same constellation as that on the cover of the Book of Light. What could it mean? Galea was on her journey into Ormrond to finally meet her betrothed, Prince Voldhar of the Dragonborn. She was accompanied by her brother, Prince Githendor, who, having previously visited the neighbouring country during Galea's ordeal, was coming along to ease her first visit. He was also secretly looking forward to meeting again the Princess Takaya. The journey had been uneventful, although not without anxiety. Their passing through the spinney had given Galea the chills, as she remembered what had happened the last time, and she was greatly relieved to have her brother by her side for comfort. She was fascinated to see the geography of the neighbouring country of Ormrond, as she had never been out of Erindel. It was not as mountainous as her beloved home, but was a country of rolling hills and forests, with small settlements here and there. 2 dragonborn children came running along the side of their cavalcade to see the travellers. This was the first time Galea had seen a dragonborn and was fascinated by their features. Her stomach flipped a little at the thought of meeting Prince Voldhar. After 2 days of riding, they approached the coastline. Here she could see rocky outcrops of land jutting into the sea, with numerous dark stone castles atop of the cliffs. This was where the highborn dragonborn clans lived. On a steep cliff in the distance, she could see the tall, dark towers of King Drevan's castle, with the red and black dragon banners flying from its heights. Galea now began to feel extremely nervous. Princess Galea and Prince Githendor were greeted in a large courtyard by King Drevan himself, who welcomed them and showed them into the castle. She was taken aback by his appearance, and she tried not to stare. She had been prepared for this, having read lots of description of the Dragonborn, but to see one in reality was another thing. They followed the king. The castle was hewn from dark stone, which gave it a gloomy atmosphere. It was decorated with banners and tapestries depicting ancient dragon scenes. Having been unnerved by the king's appearance, she was now slightly repulsed by his lizard-like tail that swung from his tunic as she walked behind him, and her stomach sank at the thought of meeting Prince Volthar. He was waiting for them in a large chamber beyond. They were introduced. Galea politely curtsied to the prince, and he returned this gesture with a low bow and a half-smile. His features, she thought, were not ugly, but his demeanour was brooding, and she could see his uneasy smile was forced. His forehead was large and bony, covered in scales, as were his cheeks. But it was his eyes she found very disturbing. They were yellow and watery and seemed to bore into her very soul. She felt quite sick. She could feel her hands trembling slightly as he reached out a clawed hand to help her up. Behind him was a young dragonborn girl, very slight and pale, with long fair hair and very pale eyes. She was dressed very finely, but her face was quite different. Even though she had the same dragonborn features, it was her smile and her sweet voice that was so welcoming. She was introduced as the Princess Takaya. She could immediately see why her brother had taken to her so well. The difference between the two dragonborn siblings was quite remarkable. Prince Volthar noticed the affectionate glance that Prince Githendor gave Princess Takaya, and his eyes suddenly began to glow orange. The old neglected woodland castle had been newly renovated for Thoran as its new forest lord. Thoran was slowly settling into his new role, visiting the forest citizens in all their communities, the pixies, woodland elves and fairies. As their new protector, he had been making regular visits, getting to know all the citizens, their thoughts, their worries, their joys. During a meeting of the clans at his woodland castle, the discussion turned to the goblins of the caves of Rom. Since the recent earth tremor, the woodland rangers had explored the area and reported that all entrances to the caves had been obliterated by rubble and debris. Although this was a sad ending for the goblin clans, they couldn't help but feel more at ease without the goblin threat hanging over the forest citizens, and they were now not so worried about the next approaching long night that would soon be upon them. During his long evenings, Thoran was lonely. He missed being part of the close-knit community amongst the woodland elves with his friends and family. He also missed Galea terribly and wondered where her life's path was taking her, and if he would ever see her again. Org continued his search across the waters of the enchanted sea. He could sense the orb of power was close. He drew all his powers together as he held his hands out over the glittering, undulating waves. "Come to me," he called under his breath. "Come to me." Beneath the waves, the merfolk of the old temple could feel the strange vibrations through the water and saw a glowing light. They were unnerved. Suddenly the orb began to shake, and a strange glow began to emanate from the curious markings on its surface. What was happening? The light and vibrations were coming from a boat on the surface. We must warn Merowyn, they agreed. Merowyn swam to the temple quickly. She could not believe it. She saw the orb now glowing and shaking on its pedestal. "He is close," she said. "This is too dangerous. How could he have possibly found the orb? We cannot let him enchant the orb with his powers. We must move it far from here. He is too close." "But where will we take it?" asked the guardians. "We must take it to the king. He will not be able to retrieve it from ELVES of Eryndeil." Merowyn knew she could not get a message quickly to Geldor. She knew she had to begin to swim the great distance across the great bay of the Enchanted Sea and up the River Erin into the valley of the Cascades without delay. The orb was taken from the pedestal and put into a sack which was tied around Merowyn's waist. Once in the sack, the orb quietened as the boat above moved further away. "Go now," said the guardians. "This is your chance." "You must get a message to Prince Geldor for me," she said. "Find the Owler in Port Skaga and have him send an owl message. It is of the utmost importance. Tell the prince I will meet him in the Cascades Valley, where the Erin meets the Five Sisters." She then swam off hurriedly. Jehedra continued to share with Aldher her findings. There is written in the ancient histories of a book belonging to the ancient mage Portheus. The book had a spell cast into it, which would give it enormous powers for the good of the elven world. The book could never be used for greed or evil purposes, but only to bring light, safety, and prosperity. The book outwardly resembled an old tome of astronomy, but not many knew of its hidden powers. The powers can only be unlocked in two ways. "Wait a moment," said Aldher. "Could this be the Book of Light that is in the great library in the castle at ELVES of Eryndeil?" Jehedra looked at him in wonderment. "You have seen such a book?" Aldher began to shake his head unbelievingly. He told Jehedra of the Book of Light and how its magic had been unlocked to bring light and safety to the fantasy forest and its citizens during the last long night, when the goblins had presented a great threat. "How was it unlocked?" she asked. Aldher told her of the Princess Galea's ability to decipher some of the early text, which told of the power of the last elf to be born during the last long night. She gasped. "This is amazing, wonderful. To think the elves had the book without knowing all this time." "But what about the second way of unlocking the powers?" he asked. Galea could not decipher the rest of the chapters, as the text was unknown. "This is where the constellation means something," said Jehedra. "This particular constellation is seen in the season before the long night descends upon us. It is a particular meeting of several planets. The last time this constellation was seen, there was a shower of shooting stars witnessed around the kingdoms. I have come to believe that the objects that fell from the heavens are orbs of power, such as the one that the ancient mage Portheus is said to have obtained. It was this that enabled the prosperity of the elven world in ancient times and created the magical portals that separated us from the world of the humans. No one is known to have possessed one since that time. If the orb of power that the merfolk are watching over is indeed one of these fallen objects from the heavens, then its power is endless. But it needs to be united with the book into which Portheus cast a spell. This unification of the book and the orb would create enormous power for good and prosperity for the elven world for generations to come." Alther said he must return immediately back to Fjellfosseren with this information. Wait, may I accompany you? Jaheira asked. I need to see this book. It would be my pleasure, he replied.